She was still just a college kid, not a professional athlete, not a rookie with a massive contract, not even draft eligible yet. And yet, Caitlin Clark had already done something that forced billion-dollar corporations to rewrite every rule in their marketing playbook. State Farm signed her for a national campaign while she was still studying for finals. Nike trusted her to anchor their first Super Bowl commercial in 27 years. Wilson made her the first female athlete in history to co-design a signature collection. And here's the part that nobody in the boardrooms saw coming. It worked. It didn't just work. It dominated. Products sold out. Commercials went viral. Competitors scrambled to catch up, and the entire sports marketing industry had to admit something they'd been avoiding for decades. They'd been doing this wrong the whole time. Because what Caitlin Clark exposed wasn't just her talent on the court. It was how badly corporate America had underestimated women's sports, how outdated their athlete marketing strategies had become, and how 120-something from Iowa could generate more authentic cultural impact than manufactured campaigns with 10 times the budget. And the brands that figured this out first, they're now sitting on gold. The ones that didn't, they're watching from the sidelines, wondering how they missed the most obvious shift in sports marketing history. If you believe the story behind the commercials matters more than the commercials themselves, hit that like button. It tells us you're here for the real breakdown, not just the surface-level hype. Let's start with what actually happened here. Because the narrative you've been sold, the one about Caitlin Clark being a marketing sensation, that's true. But it's incomplete. The real story is about exposure, about how her success revealed that every major brand in America had been playing it safe for decades, sticking to predictable formulas, betting on established stars, and completely missing the cultural shifts happening right in front of them. Caitlin didn't just become successful in commercials. She proved that authenticity, relatability, and genuine cultural momentum beat manufactured celebrity every single time. And that realization, it terrified the industry. Here's what was at stake: billions of dollars in advertising budgets, entire marketing departments built around outdated athlete partnership models, and the reputations of executives who'd spent decades insisting that women's sports couldn't drive the same commercial value as men's. Caitlin Clark walked onto the scene and dismantled all of it, not with aggressive statements or public call-outs, but with something far more powerful: results. When State Farm took a chance on her, they weren't just signing an athlete. They were making a bet that the rules had changed, that college athletes, especially women, could carry national campaigns, that authenticity mattered more than polish, that fans would connect with someone real over someone scripted. And when that campaign exploded, when From the Logo became a viral catchphrase, when kids started recreating her commercials on TikTok, when the metrics came back showing engagement rates that outperformed veteran stars with decades of experience, the entire industry had to confront an uncomfortable truth. They'd been leaving money on the table, massive amounts of money, because they'd been too cautious, too traditional, too unwilling to trust that women's sports had the same commercial firepower they'd been reserving exclusively for men. Many of you have been saying this for weeks. You saw it happening in real time. You watched Caitlin's commercials drop and immediately recognized something different about them. The energy, the naturalness, the way she didn't seem like she was performing, but just existing. That wasn't accidental. That was the entire strategy. And it worked because it was the opposite of what every other major brand had been doing for years. Let's go back to the beginning, the part that most people don't fully understand. State Farm didn't just sign Caitlin Clark because she was good at basketball. They signed her because their research showed something that made every other insurance company panic. Young audiences weren't connecting with traditional advertising anymore. Celebrity endorsements felt manufactured. Scripted commercials felt fake. And the old model of putting a famous face on screen and hoping it translated to sales, it was dying. Fast? State Farm needed someone who could bridge that gap, someone famous enough to draw attention, but authentic enough to feel real. Someone who could deliver lines without sounding like they were reading from a teleprompter. Someone who fans actually believed. They found that in Caitlin Clark, not because she was the biggest star available, but because she was the most genuine. And here's where it gets interesting. Because when State Farm made that decision, they weren't just taking a creative risk. They were making a statement about where athlete marketing was headed, away from overproduced perfection, toward real moments, real reactions, real people. The commercial itself became legendary, not because it had massive special effects or celebrity cameos or a huge budget, but because it had Caitlin being Caitlin, funny, dry, confident, perfectly comfortable in her own skin. Shoot. The confusion, the timing, the deadpan delivery. It was comedy gold, and it proved something that brands are still trying to replicate today. You can't manufacture authenticity. You can only find it. But State Farm was just the opening act, because once that commercial proved what was possible, once the engagement numbers came back, once the viral momentum built, every other major brand started asking the same question. How do we get Caitlin Clark? And more importantly, how do we avoid being left behind? Nike moved first, and they moved big. After 27 years away from the Super Bowl, they chose Caitlin Clark to anchor their return. Think about that decision. The Super Bowl, the biggest advertising stage in the world, 90 seconds of airtime that costs millions of dollars. And they trusted a college athlete who hadn't played a single professional game yet. That wasn't just bold, that was revolutionary. Because what Nike understood, what they'd figured out by watching State Farm's success, was that Caitlin represented something bigger than basketball. She represented a cultural shift, a generational change, a moment when audiences stopped caring about manufactured celebrity and started demanding real stories from real people. The commercial itself reflected that. No explosions, no gimmicks, no celebrity cameos. Just Caitlin talking about sacrifice, about missing her high school prom, about dreaming big from a small town in Iowa. It was emotional, it was grounded, it was everything modern advertising is supposed to be, and it worked because it felt true. Then Gatorade entered the conversation. But they didn't just want Caitlin in a commercial, they wanted something deeper, something that connected directly to her actual routines, her actual training, her actual life. So they created a custom hydration and recovery bottle designed specifically around her needs. Not a generic product with her name slapped on it, a product built from the ground up with her input. And when it launched, it sold out in days. Because fans didn't want another celebrity endorsement. They wanted something real, something connected to who Caitlin actually is. And right here, I need to know something. Because we're about to get into the part where everything changes, where the Wilson deal happens, and the entire blueprint gets exposed. Drop a comment below telling me which Caitlin Clark commercial hit you hardest. Was it the State Farm from the logo moment, the Nike Super Bowl emotional journey, the Gatorade authenticity? Let me know, because understanding what resonates with you helps us break down exactly why her approach is rewriting the rules. Now, Wilson, this is where things get absolutely wild. Because Wilson didn't just want Caitlin as a spokesperson, they didn't want her holding a basketball in a 30-second spot. They wanted her as a co-creator, the first female athlete in history to co-design a Wilson signature collection. Let that sink in for a second. Wilson, the company that makes the official basketballs for the NBA and WNBA, decided that the best way forward wasn't to pay Caitlin to promote their existing products. It was to give her creative control and build something entirely new together. That decision exposed something massive about how athlete partnerships had been structured for decades. Traditionally, brands controlled everything: the product design, the marketing strategy, the messaging. Athletes were brought in at the end to smile, hold the product, and collect a check. Wilson looked at that model and said, "That's not going to work anymore, not with this generation." not with someone like Caitlin Clark, because what fans want isn't a celebrity telling them to buy something. What fans want is to feel connected to the creation process itself, to believe that the product they're purchasing was actually influenced by the athlete they admire. And the commercial Wilson created? Pure brilliance. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't loud. It was quiet, contemplative, almost meditative, the sound of feet on hardwood, a basketball bouncing in an empty gym, Caitlin working on her game in the calm silence that every player knows. The message was clear. This isn't about fame. This isn't about commercials or endorsements or brand deals. This is about the game itself, the place where it all started. The reason any of this matters, it was a love letter to basketball. And it worked because it felt like Caitlin's actual relationship with the sport, not some manufactured narrative created by a marketing team. But here's what nobody talks about. Here's the part that makes this entire story so much bigger than just commercials and product launches. Caitlin Clark's success exposed a fundamental flaw in how corporate America had been approaching women's sports for decades. They treated it as a charity case, as something that needed support and encouragement and gentle nurturing, as a market that might, maybe someday, if we're patient enough, generate real revenue. Caitlin walked in and proved that entire mindset was garbage. Women's sports don't need charity. They need investment. They need platforms. They need brands willing to take the same risks, spend the same money, and trust the same instincts they've been using for male athletes forever. And when those brands finally did that, when State Farm and Nike and Wilson and Gatorade actually committed real resources, real creative energy, real strategic planning, the results were undeniable. Record-breaking engagement, sold-out products, viral cultural moments, revenue that justified every dollar spent. The proof was overwhelming. The only question was why it took so long. Connecting the dots reveals something uncomfortable. It wasn't that women's sports couldn't generate commercial value. It's that brands were too scared to find out. They were more comfortable with the status quo, more willing to accept lower expectations, more invested in the narrative that women's sports were a developing market rather than an untapped goldmine. Caitlin didn't just break through that barrier. She obliterated it. And now every brand that missed the opportunity is scrambling to catch up. You were onto something when you noticed how different her commercials felt. That wasn't luck. That was strategy. Everything about her marketing approach is designed to feel unrehearsed, unscripted, authentic. The timing in the State Farm commercial, the emotion in the Nike spot, the quiet focus in the Wilson piece. None of that happens by accident. It happens because Caitlin understands something most athletes never figure out. The camera doesn't lie. Audiences can tell when you're performing versus when you're just being yourself. And being yourself, especially when yourself is this naturally charismatic, this genuinely passionate, this effortlessly compelling, that's unbeatable. Reading between the lines of every one of these deals reveals the same pattern. Brands aren't just buying Caitlin's image, they're buying her ability to move culture. When she does something, fans don't just watch. They participate. They recreate. They share. They meme. They turn 30-second commercials into weeks-long conversations. That's the difference between a celebrity endorsement and a cultural moment. Most athletes can deliver the first. Only a handful can create the second. And Caitlin does it every single time. So what happens next? Because this is where the story gets really interesting. She's already conquered State Farm, Nike, Wilson, Gatorade. She's already proven that she can sell insurance, apparel, equipment, hydration products. What's left? Everything. Tech companies, streaming platforms, financial services, luxury brands, lifestyle products. She has zero limits. She's not boxed into sports marketing. She's not restricted to athletic wear. She can sell anything to anyone because what she's really selling isn't products. It's connection. It's authenticity. It's the belief that someone at the top of their game can still be genuinely, recognizably human. And that's the blueprint. That's what every brand is now trying to replicate. Find athletes who feel real. Give them creative control. Trust their instincts. Build campaigns around their actual personalities instead of manufactured personas. Let them be funny, emotional, vulnerable, confident, all of it. Because audiences are done with polish, they're done with perfection. They want real, and Caitlin Clark is the definition of real. Here's the truth that makes all of this so powerful. Every commercial she's done, every product she's launched, every brand deal she's signed, it all traces back to the same origin story. A little girl from Iowa who dreamed bigger than anyone expected, who worked harder than anyone realized, who believed she could do something special even when nobody else did. That story is universal. It's emotional. It's aspirational. And it's completely authentic. Brands can't manufacture that. They can only recognize it when they see it. And the ones who recognized it early, they're the ones winning now. Before we close this out, I need you to do something. Subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that notification bell, because the next video we're breaking down is going to expose something even bigger. We're looking at how Caitlin's commercial success is forcing the entire WNBA to rethink its marketing strategy, and why some players are furious about being left behind. You don't want to miss it. What's your prediction? Which brand signs Caitlin Clark next? And what kind of product will it be? Tech? Lifestyle? Something completely unexpected? Drop your thoughts below. This has been the real story behind the commercials, the blueprint, the exposure, the revolution. And it's only just beginning.